So I was thinking about the film, and I think that it will be really difficult. That we probably will discover stuff during this conversation,
Okay.
because there's so much in there, and I'm not. It's not like I don't feel like I've come away from it the way that I came away from other movies with a real, pretty much solid
Yeah.
understanding
Yeah.
of it.
I know what you mean.
I feel very like it's very abstract.
Yeah.
One thing that I thought about again is that it's his daughter, and that again you have one theme is certainly the other
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
Jap, and another theme is this sort of bumbling Gen X man who's struggling to be able to be a hero but can't pass the tests correctly. So,
Right.
like in an Indiana Jones film, you'd have the same guy, but he would have courage. He would be creating, and things would be going his way.
Sure.
And he would make the right decisions at those key moments.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
this film, he makes the wrong decisions every time he should make a decision, seemingly.
Right.
And we as viewers are confused because
Sure.
we don't know if the Jap is good or bad. We don't
Hmm.
know if the fairy or whatever we want to call the feminine is good or bad, and we
Yeah.
don't know if the shaman is good or bad. So
Right.
we don't know. So we're in his place. It's what's brilliant about it is it forces you towards your own intuition. Like you're saying, how would I work? What would I do? What step
Right.
would I take in this situation? Which is interesting because if you think about the fact that the movie brings you to a point where all of a sudden you say, "Oh, it's the girl who's bad." And so
Hmm.
you start making decisions based off that, and then you go,
Right.
"Uh-oh, I don't know if she's bad." And then I'll say this one last thing, that in the end, the effect, the person who all of this behavior and all of these mistakes are having an effect on is a female
Hmm.
who's acting viciously and violently. Something like that.
Sure.
Where it's like back to this, it's causing this feminine to behave in these horrible ways.
I feel you, man. I think part of what makes this movie interesting is that there are so many different layered kind of archetypal narratives happening at the same time. It makes for something that's really rich in meaning, but also a little bit more confusing or complex than your typical hero's journey or typical horror film allegory of. It's like it's much more complicated.
Absolutely. And
You know,
that makes it so beautiful. I
yeah,
love that it's opaque.
and that ambiguity that you're talking about with the characters, and even like for example, the daughter is at one level she is the most vulnerable character in the movie,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And she is a sweet little girl like that archetypally is the picture of innocence and sweetness and vulnerability,
Yeah.
right? That everything we as a society work to protect and defend and look after, and yet she's not. It's not clear if she's good or evil.
Right. You don't know. And it kind of goes
Right.
back and forth.
Right. It's like, is she healed? Is she not? Is she possessed? Is she not? Same thing with again also this who you call the fairy or the young woman in white. Yeah, at first, it's not clear if she's like a ghost or if she's a hallucination or if she's the witch that cursed that those first people at that first crime scene. Then as it goes on into the movie, there she's tracking the old Japanese guy, and pretty much the whole way, and she has the showdown with the shaman where he gets all sick and fucking bleeds out his face, and it's like so
Right.
there's this ambiguity again,
Yeah.
and in that ambiguity, I think there's ambiguity in every character,
Right. Yeah.
which is part of what's powerful about the film. It's like the dad, the central character, he's a bumbling idiot, but
Yeah.
he's also very well intentioned,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
he's weak on one level, but he's also a policeman, and taken up this kind of traditional masculine role and really trying to be the strong, heroic man for the women in his family.
Yeah.
But failing miserably because he's possessed by his own emotional instability, because he's too hot-headed to make a good decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Or too emotive, when something bad happens, he cries, he screams, he's fearful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He's anything but centered and grounded and strategic.
So amazing.
You know?
So amazing.
He's not strategic at all.
Yeah.
And so all of them are ambiguous in different ways.
Yeah.
Which I think is part of the whole point of the film. It's about ambiguous danger. It's about, at one level, it's about
absolutely
what we know that we know there's a threat, but we can't quite pin our finger on where it is.
Right. All right, I have a couple questions then. Even when before the young daughter was possessed, when she was just sort of this cute, good kid, she actually did some things that were sort of like, they were adorable, but they were sort of like misbehaved. And to give you two examples, like spying on her parents in the car. And it was kind of cute, and you laugh, but you're like, probably not taught well, not structured well. And also like farting in the police station.
Right.
Which is fucking adorable.
Sure.
And endearing. You love this kid.
Sure. Absolutely.
And they all laugh. But again, imagine you having a kid and she comes and does that at work. You would be like, honey, that's not proper.
Right.
Wait. So that's interesting. And how important is the girl? Let's call her the fairy. Does she represent female aspect of existence?
Mm-hmm.
Its healing power. I try to think about, if we take her out of the movie, you would definitely know, your relationship to the Jap is a little bit more concrete, and to the shaman, like their goodness or badness, or even if it's my own projected idea of goodness or badness on the Jap, which I think that's what he represents, the outsider. But with the girl, I mean, I'm still not quite sure if she's good or bad, or who she is,
So one way that I've read her character is that who she is basically nature. Like nature, the force of nature itself, which is both good and bad, or you could say neither good nor bad.
Right.
And it is kind of the silent witness to all the kind of dramas that unfold in the human domain, in the background, kind of watching us, interacting, having influence, but also kind of quietly sitting there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could almost look at the old Japanese man as a corrupted expression of human beings, as a corrupted humanity, been perverted and twisted into this weird dark form. And the protagonist, the main guy, and his daughter is kind of society, or just basic human nature.
Yeah. So then who would the shaman be in that model?
That's a good question. I think the shaman would be the mystical reality. Like the transcendent, the mysterious, the like whatever the glue between nature and humanity is, that connecting bridge.
Mm-hmm. All right, so it's something like back in the tribal times, you have your devils, or the things you don't know, the outsiders.
Right.
And I think in every way, the Jap basically represented their projection of the danger onto some outside force. The danger itself may be emanating from Mother Nature, the feminine, right?
Right.
But you have to, because Mother Nature is everything, humans have to look through that and place that on something solid. And even our religions, because there's the Catholicism in there, you have the Catholicism. He goes at the end to the Jap, and he wants to see a devil, and he sees a devil.
Right.
He sees a Catholic devil. And the shaman represents our very early ways of trying to control nature, reality, things that we perceived as out of our control, right? Like that's what a shaman does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In a mystic way, you know?
Right. And it's kind of interesting proof that he fails, that when he actually encounters her directly, she basically wrecks him and he runs away terrified.
Yeah. Do you think it's not that the Jap, it's not that the spirit in the Jap transferred, let's say, to the shaman, but that very corruption of not being able to confront nature causes the shaman to corrupt?
Yeah, or the shaman is, in some degree, a little delusional about his power. He's a little delusional about how much influence he has over evil, right? First of all. And then second of all, how much influence he has over wielding nature. And when he's confronted by her directly, he realizes that he's been faking it a lot more than he realized, that he realizes himself he was delusional. He goes, oh, fuck, she's the real power.
So, I mean, and the reason the shaman and the people of the town sort of feed each other, because they have to believe he's valuable in a mystical way in order for him to believe he's valuable in a mystical way. Like they give each other, and they believe that he's giving them value.
Right. There's like a mutual, exactly. So he's this arbiter to the spiritual.
Yeah.
What a shaman would be, but it's that loop, like you're saying, of they believe in him, so he believes in himself, and then he's giving them protection, and they're giving him kind of this authority to...
It's like sports athletes. Everyone admires the sports athlete because he's rich, could have any woman he wants, gets to go out and do this for a job. But they're the ones, because of that admiration, are actually creating their own hero, their own god. When the fairy is throwing stones, there's a scene. There's something in the Bible about
let he who is without sin cast the first stone.
Exactly. So does that mean she's sinless?
It could. So here's another interpretation on who she is. She is Christ. So in this interpretation, basically we could almost see the family, the protagonist family with the daughter, as a westernized Asian family. They're a westernized, Christianized Asian family.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. And they're contending with these traditional, archaic forces of nature and evil that come from ancient culture. So they're modern. They're dealing with a shaman. They're dealing with this demonically possessed Japanese guy who's got some weird, freaky magic. We don't know how he got or what it is, but it's influencing them, impacting them. And they're this modern Christian family. One thing that makes me think this is there's a shot where he's wanting to, I think he's like coming in or going out of the house, and you see a family photo in the background of him and his mother, his wife, and his daughter. So there's 4 of them, right? And they're arranged in the family photo in the shape of a cross. So there's one above, one below.
Who's at the top?
I forget who's at the top, but he's at the bottom.
Okay.
So he's at the center, at the bottom. Yeah. Kind of like the body of Christ. Yeah. And the other 3, the girls are arranged, probably grandmother above him.
At the top, right, yeah.
Anyways, so that was kind of an interesting clue. But if you stop and you think about it, in that model, then the fairy, the woman in white, whatever she is, could be Christ.
Right.
And first she's subtly but overtly reaching out to him by throwing stones at him.
Yeah.
Kind of. And that might be a metaphor that she's sinless.
Yeah.
And she knows everything that happened at the crime scene.
Right.
You know, she already knows.
Yeah.
And she doesn't speak about it with disgust or hatred or horror or judgment. When she starts telling him about it, she just tells him about it.
Yeah, if anything, just the fact that she could feel the suffering of it.
Right.
So her reaction to it is like an awareness of the tragedy.
Yes.
Of the thing.
Yes.
So but not judgment.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Full knowledge without any bitterness or judgment about it.
Yeah, isn't it funny that when she is there to show him what happened,
mm-hmm.
is when the devil shows up.
Yes.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Why? Why? Why, when he confronts this goodness, let's say, this angelic being, foreshadowing also, because she's wearing the army jacket in that scene. So she's aware of future events to come. We have no idea because we don't know yet. And then when she's not there anymore, maybe his fears take over. And his fears are the Jap in that form, let's say.
Right. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I had another example of how she might be the Christ figure.
Go ahead.
So another example of it is that scene where he finally encounters her kind of in the yard.
At the end.
At the end, yeah. And he's like chasing her down and he's not sure if she's dangerous or not, or she's going to like kill him or his family or not. He thinks she's actually the evil one. And she gives him a test of faith. She says, you've got to wait for these 3 rooster crows to happen. If you go back before, they'll certainly be doomed.
Yeah.
But just wait here and everything will be okay. But the way she issues it, it seems almost like a threat or like a curse, almost like a witch giving a hex or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not clear she's coming from this protective, benevolent place.
Right. That's what's so ambivalent about it.
What if? What if she was the Christ figure and she has foreknowledge of what's happening or what could happen depending on his actions? She's like, hey, if you wait, everything will be okay.
And it's like, when you look at it, it's like this has been his problem all along, that his passions, it's sort of like there were different Greek sects that had like philosophical sects. There were the Sophists, and there were who were the ones who basically sort of did not like. There were the Epicureans who loved the passions.
Sure.
And
Stoics.
The Stoics.
Right.
And it's and basically Christianity is kind of out of Stoicism.
Yes.
It comes out of that tradition.
Yes.
And so it's basically a Stoic challenge.
Yes.
It's like, just let your fear rest.
Right.
Be a higher being over this fear. Right. And it's going to be okay. But when if you do that, if you react, that reaction is itself the devil.
Right. That is the trigger that will cause this chain of tragedy
in your life.
He indulges the fear.
Yes.
He runs back too early, and it's the most tragic thing you could possibly witness.
Yeah. As a higher being in a Stoic philosophy, in a Christian Stoic tradition, mm-hmm. you are using your logic and your wisdom and your reason above your passions. Right. And you make those subservient to your passions. And the other thing that's sort of the 100-pound, is it 100-pound gorilla?
Sure.
In the room is that, this whole thing might just be bad mushrooms. And it's all these projections out onto the world. Right. So it's like let's say it's this little microcosm of a tribal society. It's like a way to look at it's the way to look at humans, how humans behave in this tribal form that's sitting in the archetypes.
Sure.
Below all our modern stuff.
Sure.
And it's like you have a tragedy,
Hmm.
which is just something like mushrooms or germ theory,
Sure. Yeah.
and but everything is externalized onto an
Sure.
evil
Sure.
nature, and then you need a
Sure.
shaman to try to make it better.
And interesting because if you think about a mushroom, mushrooms are most dangerous if you perturb them. If you leave them alone, they don't spread. But if you poke and touch a mushroom, then the spores go out and they go everywhere.
Ah, is that
Right?
true?
Yeah.
Huh.
So they really propagate when you disrupt them.
You know what else is interesting is that she hangs these flowers because she says I laid a trap, and he
Yes.
breaks through the trap, and you see there's this beautiful linen, very feminine linen, like
Yeah.
around the boundary of his
Right.
place, and he goes
Right.
through it, and there's these like flowers that as soon as he goes through they wilt. If you've watched the movie a few times, you realize that these flowers were at every other crime scene. They showed them, but you didn't know what they were yet.
Sure.
What that means is that this Jesus fairy mother nature character
Hmm.
had gone through this with every other single family
Ah,
at
nice.
every other single crime scene,
I hadn't even thought of that.
and they all failed.
Right. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
And the failure ends up in the complete destruction and tragedy of each of these families.
Each one. So it's like they're all these reactive the whole thing. They're all these reactive beings reacting, not sublimating their immediate urges to a higher thought. She's
Yeah.
just asking them to do that in the face of this, and they refuse. They have to blame an other. They have to blame the Jap and get a shaman to come. And so when you think about those things in terms of them being psychological or philosophical,
Yeah.
and story being a way to sort of present that, it gets like a little confusing because the way another director would have handled it, he would have left some of the ambiguity out of it, so that on
Uh-huh.
second watches you could have said something like, "Oh, the pictures at the Jap's house were
Right.
never really there. That was
Yeah.
just they wanted to see the evil or something,
Right.
right? Based off of the
Right.
model of what we're saying, but the pictures really were there."
Sure.
So that then, if this is a movie about blaming our problems on an other, but yet he actually is also photographing these people
Right.
and doing hexes and things, so it becomes a little scary or tricky. You don't know like why that is.
So I just had an interesting thought about what that is, what that symbolizes. His taking photographs. I think there's the obvious metaphor that he's stealing souls.
Yeah.
You know, that
Yeah.
old thing. You take someone's soul and you take the photograph. So he's harvesting souls through photographs. But I think, going along the narrative of what we're talking about here of people failing God's invitation, failing the test of controlling themselves. One way of interpreting the devil is that he is what comes in when people aren't able to control themselves.
Yeah.
So what he does is he comes in and he documents their reactiveness, documents them in the process of being swept up in their own nature.
Yeah.
And that's kind of his prize. It's his affirmation. It's his validation that his way, which is this reactive, animal, controlling degradation of life, it's affirmed every time they fall into this trap of not passing God's test.
Right. Of being trapped in their own emotions and in the moment without using their higher
Higher faculty.
Yeah.
Exactly. And he's basically celebrating that. He is collecting that. So maybe it's not so much that he is using these to cast spells so much as that he's collecting proof of his success, of his dominance, of his infiltration.
Right. It is those very lower level functions are proof of him. They are him.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's funny because what a balancing act life is. And I think the 60s were a very Epicurean time.
I'd say.
Coming off of, I mean, we weren't there and we only have like pop culture's interpretation of it, but coming off like a very tight restriction, not in a Victorian way, but in an
Sure.
American, sort of the proper philosophical way of being aware of your higher functioning over your immediate reactions sort of got lost in strict dogma. And so the reaction to that was this Epicureanism of the 60s, which was to
Sure.
release those other things from the dogma. And now we're in a situation in our world where all the whims, everybody's whims have been elevated. And we're re-seeing all over again what those problems are.
Right.
When you live that way.
Which probably to some degree is an inevitable process that culture must move through, where we kind of wobble back and forth between being kind of, let's say, tight and narrow
Yes.
in the behavioral codes,
Yeah.
which creates a lot of stability. But then that also obviously leaves a lot of opening for abuse of that. You know what I mean? Like you get bureaucracy telling people to do things and follow the code just for the sake of following the code.
Without ever even understanding why, they forget.
Right. And without adapting to a changing set of needs or a changing sentiment in the culture or all the other dynamics that happen in the world, in nature. So if culture is too rigid and too structured, as nature around it changes, it can make the culture look like a lie, like a falsehood, like bullshit.
Yeah.
But then the other side of the coin, then societies switch into being Epicurean and liberty oriented and independence oriented and sovereignty, and we give permission to self-indulge because every human being is an animal, and every animal needs a certain amount of safety signals that come in the form of pleasure in order to feel up, right?
Right.
And since we're wired to value those highly, we go crazy for them.
Yeah. Right. There.
So then we go in the other direction, and we run after these pleasure signals of, food, sex, drugs, freed up social interaction without constraint or boundary, saying what we think without any opinion of or worry about repercussion, and really just generally abandoning the orientation towards collective structure and collective stability.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It was interesting because my cousin picked me up at the airport the other day, and he was talking about his friends and how everybody's just miserable with their job. They hate what they do, and they all just sit around and they just get high. They smoke pot all the time, and they eat terrible food. And I'm here on the East Coast, and it's just there's not that focus on healthy organic food.
Sure.
And healthy organic living, coming fresh from California.
Yeah.
And sort of being kind of engulfed in these types of thinking and these types of talks, and then being picked up in my old world on the East Coast, and hearing my cousin kind of talking about things, and I go, wow, it's like just total nihilism. There's no higher purpose. No one has a higher being. They're not moving towards any collective good, any personal good. It's just total indulgence, and it's made everybody fucking miserable. And and you know what? The opposite, when it's too rigid, eventually makes everybody miserable. So Absolutely. It's this constant rocking, and I guess maybe that you rock back and forth, and you hit this perfect place where it's like a good time for a little while.
Sure.
Until the structure starts to get tight again. I wonder if you look at spiral dynamics and you look at level 4, level 5, level 6, I wonder if with this jump to level 7, if we start to rock back and forth less.
That's a good question. From what I know about spiral dynamics, it seems like every level of the spiral. So basically, level 7 is a higher octave, a repeat of level 1.
Right.
but at a higher level.
Yeah.
So you're back at these fundamentals and these basics and this individualistic drive and need at level 7 that you would see in 1. But the difference is that it's systemic. You're understanding how everything fits together. So instead of everything being mysterious and overwhelming and immediate, and I just need to satiate my basic pleasures, now it's, okay, I see everything. I see how it all fits and how it all works. But it seems like, in general, you move between collective and individual with every level in the spiral.
Yes.
So it's probably the same thing. That's probably what we're looking at is as society shifts its center of gravity, because the society is made up of different people at different levels in the spiral. As it shifts its center of gravity to a different place in the spiral, that's going to make it more of that collective, tightened up, or that expansive, individualistic.
Right.
Individualistic tends to be also expressive, expansive, and the collective sides tend to be controlling, rigid.
Yeah.
Right?
The interesting thing about the level 6 and where society is sort of working this out now is that you have rigid collectivism.
Yes.
It's so interesting, you know?
Yes.
It's like it's like if you're not a collective person, you're evil.
Right.
And, you know, it's so amazing, like, to be caught in that.
Yes.
I wonder if that expresses itself through this movie in any way. Where, if you were to look at this film, The Wailing, through a spiral perspective, and you were to look at what level the father is in, because it's really him.
Sure.
It's his process that we're stuck in, you know?
Yes.
Where would you think he's trapped?
I think he's trapped somewhere. I think his center of gravity is probably blue. And I think that that's probably true of most Asian cultures in general.
Right.
Is that it's somewhere between blue and orange, depending on which country and what era.
Right.
But, you know,
so like Japan is very centered in orange, it seems.
Yeah. But traditionalism is still a huge part of all these cultures.
Yeah.
And which is deep in the blue,
yeah.
you know. And I think he's trying to do the traditional thing. I think he clearly has a modern, self-indulgent man thing. There's a little bit of orange there in that sense. But I think he's mostly in blue. He's trying to be a good guy and do the right thing. And I think emotionally he's somewhere more like in red. So he is trying to control the situation. He's, you know, it's all about his temper and his impulses in the moment. It's not measured. It's not thought out. It's just, I want to fucking kill anything threatening my daughter.
From a Catholic religion perspective, because I'm going to kind of refer to what you just said.
Yeah.
His big sin, because he asks her, why is this happening?
Uh-huh.
And she tells him at the end of the film, the fairy Jesus woman tells him, because you sinned. And the sin was throwing the Jap over the side.
I forget how she said it. That was kind of the implication, but it was like, I forget her exact words, but that's a good point.
Yeah, so I felt it more in the first watching of the film.
Yeah.
And I saw it 3 times. And that this was a really big moment for those characters. They have an ethical dilemma. They go after this guy. They chase him down a mountain. And he runs, and then eventually they lose him, and they hit him with the car. And it's like this vigilante pack. It's really funny because, well, not funny, but they throw him over the side, and you feel like, okay, they've made a mistake here. Ethically, this is not a higher ethical feeling. This is reactive. Right. They don't even know if this guy's done anything. They're blaming the guy for being a witch.
Yeah.
What the fuck in modern society?
Right.
You know? And there's all this talk of them being mushrooms, and he refuses. He's like, no, I know it's not that. Sure. This is a witch.
Sure.
And so him and his buddies, particularly the buddy who owned that little kind of cafe where they went to, as they throw him over, the buddy is crying.
Right.
He's crying. Like, he knows that what they've done is like the worst possible thing a soul could do. They've gone over the line
Right.
to a point of no return.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that certainly wasn't how I read the film on the surface on first viewing. I definitely read it much more like the whole thing was just so emotionally and physically taxing. They were just fucking way past their limit, and it was just blowing them out, you know?
Yeah.
They're all reacting in their own unique nature. Like the shop owner, like his was to implode and cry and get emotional. The protagonist was to just get into this intense, like animalistic, angry, violent, fix it kind of mode.
Yeah.
You know? And they each had their own way of dealing with the problem. But the end solution was to just throw it over the cliff, to just throw it off the road, to not see it anymore.
There you go. Yeah.
To get it away.
Yeah.
Rather than to thoroughly examine, explore, and really solve it.
Yeah.
You know.
So,
but I like what you're saying too. I think that's probably also there.
Yeah.
You know, as another allegory there is that they know they're doing the wrong thing, and it's like that weird wrong is right kind of thing.
But isn't that when you talk about ethics? It's like that's what ethics is. It's like this ethical dilemma. If we look at it from the way I said it, this ethical dilemma, they throw him over and they make a religious ethical dilemma that's a sin and punishable by death or evil or to hell or something. But you do that because on a low level you want to rid yourself of the problem. They're combined, are two ideas in that way. It's like you don't make an ethical problem because you think you're making the wrong decision. You think you're doing the right decision, but it's lower functioning. That's the problem. It's reactive. And it's like, let's get this thing out of our nature. Let's get this thing out of our being. Even up on the mountain when the guy goes over the side of the cliff, the protagonist falls down and he's crying. He's my daughter, my daughter, my daughter. His whole thing is to save his daughter. And in some weird way, it's like your behavior is why your daughter is the way she is.
Yeah, interesting. And it's also, at the same time, he's using this excuse of his daughter as a justification for behaving in the most unconscious, animalistic, atrocious way.
Yeah.
You know, he's doing evil shit. He is totally run amok with his emotions. He's not thinking logically. He's not being wise. He's just being aggressive and basically a chicken with its head cut off. You know?
A bumbling idiot, like you said.
Yeah. And using her as the justification to be in that mode.
Right.
And then also, it's his poor functioning in the first place that's made her vulnerable, and that's contributed to her being the way she is.
That's what you would say if you were looking at it in the philosophical meaning behind this.
Right.
You know, your children are a result of your actions. His not being a strong enough, let's say, fully functioning masculine man.
Which is an interesting allegory into, maybe in a weird way, he's trying to fix himself.
Through trying to fix his daughter. This gives him a focal point of something.
Right.
But making wrong mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know how to fix himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to fix the situation.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So he makes the same old mistakes that he's always made.
Yeah.
Bringing him into a fucking terrible dance of falling apart with the devil, when he could have maybe accepted the grace of this fairy, this Christ figure,
to take care of it. If you all you have to do is just sublimate your lower functioning emotions low. She'll take care of it.
Right.
It's like, that's what faith is, right? I mean, in some way, the symbolism behind praying to Jesus is like, every part of me wants to have this reaction. Please take care of this so I don't have to react.
Yeah.
Wow, man, that's really good. That's really good. So the shaman would then just be lower functioning level society, like
Right.
pre society back,
Right.
their solution to the problem. What I don't understand is why he corrupts. Finally, all right. So let me just say this, because in case people don't understand what we're saying, is that in the beginning I believe he was true and good and trying to make a change, but
Sure.
by the end of the film,
Yeah.
he's taking pictures and
Yeah.
capturing souls. So you could imply that there's a corruption that's happened. And he has no problem walking right in past the little girl at the end of the movie.
Right.
She's outside.
Right.
She's not a threat to him whatsoever. And he walks in to take a picture of the policeman protagonist in his ultimate failing.
Which would be the ultimate validation for, again, the devil.
Yes. Yeah.
I think from a spiral dynamics point of view, shamanism and shamans and that whole mythical archetypal thing is all level 2.
Yeah.
Exactly. And really, if you really want to go full spiral, you could even say the devil is level 1.
The level is all the devil would be everything that occurs in level 1.
Right. All the basest, most immediate, most corrupted animal aspects of being human being.
Right.
Driven to placate our own, what's the word? Drive.
Yeah.
So the devil's almost like level 1, or like a corrupt level, the worst of level 1. And society and the shaman is like level 2.
The level 2's the society's way to deal with level 1 at that level.
Which is to band together, to mythologize, to see spirits in nature, to start to ritualize around relating to this larger force of nature through a animistic, quasi-religious kind of lens.
Right, anthropomorphizing things and
Exactly.
and believing that you can affect change in nature by appeasing to nature.
Right.
By a rain dance or something, a shaman.
And it's very much about this is how it is. This is how nature works. This is how the world operates around us. There's no questioning if spirits are real or not. They are real.
Right, but you sort of at the level 2, you see the connection that if there's rain clouds, there's rain. If there's no rain clouds, our crops die. So I can influence this through a dance.
Right. So I pray to the rain gods to bring rain. Right.
And then you would go ahead.
So the shaman represents that.
Right. Absolutely. Yes.
And so the protagonist is that next level up from that. He's red, right? He's red-blue.
Yeah.
At least his emotional side is red, and who he is as a family man is blue. Right. And so every time the shaman tries to do what the shaman does, this guy intervenes. Because he goes into red mode of, I'm going to take control of the situation.
Right.
I'm not going to trust these nature spirits. I'm not going to trust this ritual. Right. I'm going to take matters into my own hands and try to force an outcome here. And fails.
Yeah.
So he's dealing with these bigger forces of the devil, right? The corrupted aspect of nature. And then the shaman, which is this layer of this mythologized control of nature, or attempt to control nature.
Right.
Through these rituals and magic spells.
Interesting. And on the other side, so if he's at level 3, let's say, I'm going to power through this and control things on my own, self-centered. The other side that he appeals to is level 4, Christianity.
Yes, exactly.
And he goes in to talk to the priest, who basically tells him, let authority take care of this.
Yeah.
Let the police take care of this. Let the doctors take care of this. There's no place in Christianity to deal with this. This is, like, we know our connection. We have a connection to God through Jesus, but we have no way to affect health problems. Because by level 4, you realize they're unconnected, or you think they're unconnected, right? Like, we're not going to be able to solve, your daughter ate something. Right. Like, it's like level 4 is the beginning of science.
Yes.
You know,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
it comes out of, they say, you know, the thought that science and the Renaissance and scientific method was born out of Christianity.
Well, it was born out of civilization, which is what level 4 really is.
Yes.
So, level 2 is like tribalism. Level 3, like warring tribes or like these warring nation states
With heroes and villains.
with heroes and dominator figures and
Yes.
gangsters.
Yes.
You know,
Attila the Hun.
warlord. And then you go to level 4 and you get civilization, you get trade, you get commerce, you get agreed rules and boundaries and limitations in order to organize into a larger win-win. But there's a failure, like you're saying in it. They don't know how to deal with his chaos in red, or the chaos of the shaman in purple, or the chaos of the actual devil down in beige.
Yeah, well, they're the viewpoint of the Catholicism is that these are, let the police handle it and let the doctors handle it. That's what they're there for.
Which, like you're saying, is all blue.
Yeah.
Doctors, a medical system, a police system, and then
I think of this. Jesus says the thing. What is it like? Let unto Caesar. Let Caesar.
Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's sort of that's what the priest is basically telling him.
Yeah. Which, in other words, is a failed system. Oh, you have a problem, and we don't have a solution for it.
Or that's not in the realm, that the problems that you have are not in the realms of the spiritual.
Your problem's not even real, bro.
Yeah, it's not even there. There's no evil there. It's just science. It's just your daughter ate something. That's what the doctors are telling you. This is no. So the guy. So the protagonist is stuck between trying to behave in a level 4. Not believing the shaman, yet believing these lower level that there's magic happening. He believes there's magic happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, clearly there is some sort of something going on.
Right.
He's seen enough to know that there's something going on that he has no explanation for.
Right, but it could just be the mushrooms.
Could be.
You know, a very easy fix. You know, just don't eat those mushrooms. Figure out what you ate.
Sure.
Like, nowhere do they ever check the food that they ate.
That's true.
Not once.
That's
Even
true.
though it's all over the news.
Right.
We never see them go, well, did we eat anything? You know?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's just a total jump to it has to be this guy. This is the problem.
Right. Which is what happens. It's interesting. So they say in spiral dynamics, when you get stressed out, when you go through a moment of challenge, you fall back into a previous level in the spiral. You don't typically stay at your highest level when you're hit with a big challenge. So the shaman gets challenged. He falls back into beige and becomes an ally of the devil.
Right. Maybe.
You know, the protagonist gets challenged, falls into red.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so there's this kind of degeneration that happens that the devil can't degenerate because he's already degenerated.
He's just all the lower functioning things. Yeah.
Right. Which kind of makes him, in a certain sense, the most truthful character.
Yeah.
Like he is who he is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You know what's interesting is the devil represents all our base needs, but not all our base needs as being okay. It's all our base needs with a warning.
Yes.
The warning is that they're evil, or they're that if you just live off of these base needs, there will be a problem that will cause your life lots of problems.
Yeah.
And that's why they stick the devil's face right there. Does that make sense?
I think that's it. I think the devil represents the urges of nature run amok. If we don't let our base desires get checked
by the higher level,
really by an awareness of all our relationships and everything else we want, and our awareness of the future, if we don't check any of that and we're just totally in the moment, caught up in our most base drives, then what you get is absolute evil.
Right. You get the situation of this film.
Right.
Chaos.
Yeah. Chaos, degeneration, and that gets really bad.
Huh. Well, there you go. Well, I think that's pretty good, don't you?
I feel great about that. Yeah. I feel like we definitely got into it.
Yeah, that's a good one.